Chapter 31, Where the Heart Is. Where the Heart Is. With little else to do and a good hour of everyone sat within that camp, baking under a high sun, Brianna's suggestion had been seized upon with a group-wide enthusiasm that was rarely seen those days. And so there they were, sat upon the northern bluffs in the shade of the rocky shelf that seated the monastery above, their group settled on blankets and cloaks to languish in the heat. They had decided, in the end, it would be safe enough to leave their tents set up, Frithha collecting up their more valuable items to bring with them, and it was not as though they could not keep a watch of the place, the bluff high enough that Imoen could just see the eastern edge of that sprawling encampment, their small circle of tents just specks before the endless desert. Imoen patted the leg that rested next to her. It was too hot for any more contact than that, the wind stifling even in the shade. Inomen and Brianna sat similarly a few yards along the bluff, Solafane alone with his lute another yard from them, while only two of their company braved the sunshine. Frithha stood playing the fool with Minsk on the scrubby plain before them, the Rashami apparently teaching her the art of the battle cry. That she was horribly hungover had had no bearing on her friend's industry. That morning, finding Frithha bolting her breakfast to seek out Lucaille and borrow a small wooden tub, the girl dragging it up the bluff to the old well, and Imoen could see their clothes now, tiny spots of color against the dull brown canvases where they had been laid over their tents to dry. Back in the sun, Frithha was trying to tempt another to their games.
"Come on, Solafane, come and have a go." "No, no. Fighting in the darkness requires stealth, not strident cries of valor." "You are not tempted to join them?"
rumbled the voice at Imoen's side, the girl glancing up in time to catch Valigar's smile.
"Nah, I've already got my battle cry perfected, see?"
She threw her arms above her head, her voice shrill.
"Ah!"
The ranger chuckled. The sound lost as Minsk's roar exploded across the gully, echoing off the cliffs to fade away to nothing.
"Now you, young Frithha."
Fritha's rather more moderate efforts ended in laughter.
"I can't," she giggled, "I feel too self-conscious." "You certainly were not so afflicted last night,"
offered Solafane.
"Perhaps I should send down to the tavern for some ale."
Frithha countered this with a hand gesture that would have earned her a cuffed ear back in Candlekeep. The drow just laughed, Imoen's smile fading as her gaze fell on two stooped, cowled figures who were making a hurried march up the bluff. Monks on their way back to the monastery by their look, their simple brown robes ending at the knee to reveal wide linen trousers, the fabric gathered and bound tightly about each calf by thin ties, leather sandals slapping on the dusty stone. Imoen watched them draw level. The path they had taken was not the most direct route back, her own curiosity mirrored in the face that was stealing glances at her from beneath the hood, the young woman seeming to slow as Imoen caught her eye, her taller companion frowning as he tried to hurry her along. Imoen raised a hand and threw on a smile.
"Hello there."
The young woman stopped dead, her companion reluctant to follow as she turned to approach, the woman entering the shade to throw back her hood and reveal a tanned, angular face dominated by two dark eyes, her black hair cropped as short as any man's, and Imoen was surprised to see the youth with her head shaved his off completely.
"You're from the monastery, right?"
Imoen confirmed, not waiting for any answer as she added brightly,
"I'm Imoen and this is Valigar." "You are from the camp?"
asked the young woman warily.
"Well, we're down there camped with them," conceded Imoen. "There was no room at the inn with all the mercs kicking about."
The pair shared a look, the woman ignoring her companion's scowl.
"Are you all ballspawn?" "No, just me and Frithha over there."
A glance back to Minsk and Frithha, the girl now trying to teach the Rashami a slow waltz. The young woman frowned.
"Your friends are very odd." "Yeah, but we like them best like that."
The youth next to her sighed tersely.
Come, Yemi, we are not supposed to talk with their kind.
Yemi dragged her arm from his grip with a glower, the look softening as she returned to her.
Why are you here, if you are not with Melisande? Well, we came to help her stop some Ballspawn who plan to start a war. So they do follow Melisande. Come on, Yemi.
She was losing her, Imoen threw caution to the wind.
Why doesn't Balthazar trust Melisande? I mean, we don't much trust her either, but I was curious as to what his reasons are. It is not for us to make assumptions about our master's opinions,
snapped the youth angrily. Yemi, though, looked pensive, as though it was a question she herself had pondered more than once.
I do not know. High Master Balthazar does many things I do not understand. Like stopping help to the village and hiring the mercenaries,
confirmed Valigar. Yemi nodded, her friend seemingly frustrated at this agreement.
Our order is committed to ending the taint of your vile blood. What is a single village compared to that? High Master Diva used to say all life has value, be they peasant or pasha. Diva is High Master no longer, he walks with the spirits now. Balthazar leads us and he has decreed it is forbidden to speak with the cursed ones.
Imoen sighed.
You don't believe that, or you wouldn't be here. We're just people.
Yemi looked torn, her head dipped as she pulled up her hood once more.
Thank you for talking with us.
And Imoen watched the pair continue their path up the bluff.
You did well there.
She glanced to the man next to her, the compliment lost in the worry that twisted in her stomach.
We didn't learn anything. No, we learned something. Not all under his command agree with Balthazar. Come.
Valigar continued, when she refused to be cheered, the man making to his feet.
Walk into the village with me, I will buy you a mead.
Imoen smiled, taking the hand he proffered.
Braving the tavern for me, are we? It must be love.
Valigar said nothing, though Imoen could not miss his grin. Anomen watched her, feeling the smile pull in spite of himself as Fritha laughed, tugging at Minsk's sleeve and encouraging him back to her when a turn sent him off in the wrong direction. Brianna shifted at his side, a glance finding her gaze held similarly, her face bearing the same fond smile, though her eyes held something deeper he could not discern.
She is emerging, is she not? The girl you once knew.
Anomen sighed, turning back to watch her, the white curdy glowing like her smile, bangles and earrings catching in the sunlight. Her hair was up as usual, but much more extravagantly than he was used to seeing, a nest of braids and curls held in place with a golden camellia pin, and all worn with that air of careless charm, like some hoyden young princess from a child's tale.
She always did seem happier from a distance,
he offered, not adding that he wondered sometimes if he should have ever tried to move closer.
I can hardly believe we were such friends once. I had never had one like her, one to whom I felt I could tell anything, and there was a time, I believe, I was the same for her, and now it is gone. It is a loss I am sure she feels keenly.
The man snorted.
She hides it well.
Fritha was laughing again, now calling to Solafane for a tune. Anomen made his decision.
Brianna, who did I recall to you, when we... A temple guard,
she cut in quickly, though the softness to her voice took the bite from it.
You were in love with him.
A stilted shrug that did not quite affect the nonchalance it implied.
As much as I could be, relationships within the temple were not encouraged. But his sincere affection, at last, vanquished your misgivings.
He teased.
Such a romantic view of things, a nomen,
she laughed, warm enough that the derision it held was merely an undertone.
It was actually I who pursued him. He was reluctant at first, said our focus should be on greater things, though in the end it was I who finished it when I left for the order.
She smiled faintly, dark eyes shining with a distant light. Her skin was as tanned as his now, many days in the sun bringing the auburn from her dark braid.
It was his devotion that I see in you.
A nomen spluttered over the word.
Devotion? I think we established a while back that I am not the most devout of men, for all my aims.
Her gaze was back on the pair before them.
No, not to Helm, to her. You are the only one who holds her in the esteem she deserves.
A nomen considered such a relationship hardly sounded healthy, and if he were being honest, he was not sure how he felt about Fritha now, this girl who lately had brought him nothing but misery. And in that moment, he did not feel anything outside of an aching desire to fill the void within. Across the dusty bluff, Valigar and Imoen were heading down into the village, the tall man's hand resting lightly on her shoulder. A nomen's voice came hoarse in the dry air.
Brianna, would you like to visit the tavern with me later?
There was nothing platonic in his offer and the woman knew it. She looked torn, perhaps thinking on the love she left for the sake of her duty, and she was not smiling when at last she answered, her head dipped in this defeat of her better judgment.
A nomen, Yes, that would be nice.
The tavern had been the usual press of mercenaries, the barkeep trusting them enough to take their tankards of mead with them, on the condition they returned the empty cups later, Imoen finding them a place in the shade of the last empty house on that street, where they were shielded from the glare of sun and those sat outside the tavern both. Valigar leaned back against the cool, whitewashed plaster, his gaze trained upon the vast stretch of desert before them, shifting sands sparkling in the light, whipped up by the occasional gust to prickle the skin and hiss across the stone about them. His mead was finished a while ago, he had not realized his thirst until that first sip, the empty tankard set next to him, while Imoen sat on his other side. She had made a better pace of her drink, her eyes half closed as she leaned back, lips pink swollen with the cool liquid. The shadow there brought out the paleness to her skin, cheeks and forehead dusted with that sprinkling of freckles. Her tunic was unlaced in the heat, the swell of one milky breast just pushing past the fabric. Valigar turned pointedly back to the desert. He was not the most physical of men, but there was a careless sensuality to Imoen, so different to the affected ladies of his youth, that it easily evaded his guard. Clouds were gathering on the horizon, his mind drawn back to graver matters as he wondered whether the sun beat so relentlessly upon his own lands. He had hoped for a good almond harvest this year, last year being too wet, but this much sun would be just as detrimental. He had visited the groves a few times with Nentat in his youth, and he imagined the holdings now, rows upon rows of the dusky green trees, all bowed under the weight of their ripening fruit, though it was nothing compared to the spring, when white blossoms clung to the branches like dry snow to scatter in blizzards with every breath of wind, the sweet scent heavy in the warm air. It was not the wilds he loved so well, but it was beautiful. He resolved to show her, if given the chance. Valigar started as smooth fingers brushes against his own.
You lost in thought there, Vals. I was thinking on my estate. I am sure it is faring well under Nentat's hand, indeed, it has for many years now, but for the first time in my life, I wish I could be there to ensure as much.
The girl cocked her head slightly, face wearing a mildly contemplative look he rarely saw on her.
You're really going back there, aren't you? After all this is over. You doubted it. A bit,
she sighed, finishing her mead to set the cup before her, hands on her heels and pulling her legs in, the empty tankard a dark pupil within that unblinking eye.
This life gets into your blood, I noticed it in Sultanaseller. Since I left Candlekeep, part of me longed for a home, but a month anywhere and my feet start itching.
Valigar shrugged. He had suspected as much from their few talks together in the elven city, and if the years had taught him anything it was that, though in the rush of youth, there did not ever seem enough time, there was a pace to all things, and it was usually much slower than one had previously thought.
Well, I am older than you, and have traveled enough in my time that I would likely not feel as great a pull, even without this duty upon me. If you wish to travel after this, with Fritha or one of the others, I will understand. Just know there will be a place for you at my estate, should you wish it.
Imoen was watching him with a soft look.
You're lovely, you know? And the others can stay at your house, too. Yes, if they wish. I would say bring anyone you please back with you, though you would likely fill the house in a season. You make friends easily, it is a pleasant trait.
The girl grinned, nestling closer despite the heat.
Oh, what else do you like about me, Vals? I never did get that list from you.
Valigar smiled, feeling it stir low in his stomach as he slipped his fingers up her shoulder and under that silken curtain to caress her slender neck.
You are natural, apart from certain exceptions.
He let his fingers sweep playfully forward to flick her cerise hair. It was longer now than when he had first met her in the asylum, the straight tresses just brushing her shoulders where they would flip out or under in short half curls. Something Imoen seemed to have noticed as she moved to tie it carelessly back.
It needs a cut. I can't be bothered with it long, I don't know how Fritha stands it in this heat. What are you looking at? Merely wondering what you would look like with your natural color grown through.
Imoen drew back with a snort.
I can tell you that, boring. Why'd you even care? I wish to see you as you are. Well, this is it. Perhaps. But you first changed it to stand apart from your peers, I think you shine as you are.
Imoen's eyebrows were twitching, but a quarter-inch away from a frown.
Well, then what does it matter what color my hair is? You don't hate it pink, do you? No,
he conceded awkwardly and deliberating each word as he continued, mindful his offer was not mistaken for a proposal of another sort.
But if I am to return to Athkatla after this and take up my title, such a life comes with certain restrictions. The expectations of how a lord should live and act are a narrow course I once refused to follow, but I vowed after Lavak's end to leave my family a legacy of deeds to carry on our name in place of another cursed heir, and, when you are ready, it is something I believe you could perhaps have a part in, if you are willing.
A smile was curling her lips, slight and almost appraising as she weighed his offer.
Yeah, I guess we could give that a try.
She let the smile linger on him a moment, before turning back to the desert.
I'm not changing my hair though.
Valigar laughed. It was just before the dawn, their barge moored upon a lake of creeping mists, those awake told to stay, and Jahara did not even bother to have the gangplank lowered, the turf soft underfoot as she dropped to the bank in a spray of dew, the wet jolt through her body only thing that felt real, while before her that wall of trees loomed dark in the auroral haze, the forests of Ozif, the shadow of a dream. It was a good 2 hours' walk to the grove proper, but she knew the way, the forest about her changed yet hauntingly familiar even after so long. And it was beautiful, the canopy of ageless trees stretching up to a clear milky sky, the light filtering through to dapple a carpet of last year's leaves, or stream effulgent into glades to nourish the planets and grasses therein. The Ozif was not held in permanent vernal lushness as the trade meat grove had been, but nature's severity seemed softened there, and the parched plains of Tether might have been 100 leagues away, when she passed beneath those leafy boughs. Jahara let a hand brush the trunk next to her, the bark nibbled back to the wood beneath. There were many herds of deer there, kept safe from the hunter's arrogance and pursued only for food not sport, her clan sharing their home with the countless other creatures, both prey and predators, all equal and in harmony in that place. It had been her whole world once, landmarks overlooked by the casual trespasser, given the permanence of names by those who had lived there before her. The rotting trunk of the sundered one, a great oak brought down in its prime by a lightning strike in her 9th autumn, the deep pool of Elditha's mirror, and the ever-eerie pillars, where the air always seemed cooler, a dense copse of silver birches as old as the forest itself and grown, it was said, by Sylvanus to imprison some great evil long ago, when even he was young. And as the forest endured, so had her memories of the place, of playing there with the other children of the clan, of growing older and learning the ways of nature and her brood, be they of the earth or merely living upon it. Learning how to survive and protect life there, and to feel the energies that imbued all living things within that sacred place. And that ever-persisting memory, unfaded by time, of bringing there the one person who had completed her life in a way that even the forest and her clan never could.
Hold, traveler, you walk in lands protected by the druids of.
She turned to the voice, and there he was, crouched upon the lowest bough of the oak above her, his face bearing a few more lines and a scrubby beard that had appeared since their last meeting. The rest of his short, brown hair was tied back, away from the dark eyes that widened as they found her.
By the stones of Isath, Jahara. Hello, Nathaniel. Hello yourself,
he cried, dropping from the bough with a creak of leathers to close her in a fast embrace, the man rough in his joy.
It must have been 6 years since last you were here. How are you, friend? Still striving for balance in the chaos of the outside world? And where is that fine husband of yours? I never did forgive him for stealing you away from.
He trailed off at her empty look, his throat bobbing.
Oh, Jahara, forgive me, I did not. It is fine, Nathaniel, you were not to know. But I am not here for that, I must speak with Elder Deirdre.
He nodded wordlessly, seeming to understand her need for silence. The last hour passed in only the labor of their breathing, and, at last, though trees as familiar to her as the lines on her hand, she and Nathaniel stepped into the lowen glade. The broad clearing was littered with the few canvas shelters she would have expected for the warmer time of year. A half-dozen people both recognized and unfamiliar sat about, preparing skins or sharpening another batch of wooden arrows in the endless cycle of hunting, foraging and mending that required the least contact with world outside the forest. Their clans spent the summer there, that the solstice could be properly measured and venerated at the nearby ruin before moving deeper into the forest for winter's approach, a nomadic life that had been hers once. An older woman was seated on the far side of the glade, tanned and lithe even in her years, her wiry grey head bent over the pair of soft hide breeches she was patching, the woman wearing something similar under the leather jerkin and, the only luxury to indicate her status, a long linen tunic in deepest saffron. Jahara ignored the sudden stirrings of her arrival about her, the long trampled grass springy underfoot.
Elder Deirdre.
The woman glanced up, and Jahara was greeted by the same pointed, shrewish countenance, seemingly unchanged from their last meeting, from even their first meeting all those years ago, the sharp nose and pursed mouth ever softened by the merry sparkle of her bright green eyes. Was it something to do with her connection to the forest, or just the love she held for the woman which softened the lines upon that kind, wise face? Deirdre exchanging her work for her stave to struggle to her feet.
Jahara, my child, you have returned to us. Yes, Elder, and I fear I bring a great burden.
Deirdre's eyes warmed with a beatific smile.
Never came trouble with you, Jahara. Not the first time, and not since. Come.
She continued, turning to gesture southwards.
I sense a tale in you, and I have yet to make this morning's offerings. Walk with me, and we will solve your problem together.
They set out, heading south to where Jahara knew the ancient ruins lay, while Deirdre commented here and there about the changes in the forest and their clan. The herd of wild boar had been driven from the western reaches by the Old Fangs wolf pack 2 winters back, and Luda and Shirel sealed their union last spring, and Luda had since given birth to twins, small mundane matters that eased the jumble of emotions with her. So, Deirdre began eventually, her tone losing its conversational cadence.
You bring a burden, but I sense another within in you, and one you have borne much longer.
A paused to their pace as soft eyes held her own.
Khalid has returned to the land, has he not? Do not look so surprised, child, even if I did not know it would take as much to tear him from your side, you carry the wound of his passing within you still, a scar across your soul.
Jaehaera swallowed, unable to speak for the sudden ache within. Always put aside for other concerns, it never seemed to get the air it needed and, like a wound, the memory festered.
There are no words.
Deirdre sighed tiredly.
No, there are not. But for what comfort it gives, I grieve his loss with you, as will many here.
A silence between them, long enough to respect weight of what they discussed, but broken before melancholy set in, Deirdre turning to continue their path.
So what is this trouble you worry you have brought to us, child? I will need to hear of it if we are to find a resolution.
And so Jaehaera told her, of the camp and the horrors that had been wrought within, of its end and the beginning of but a fresh set of problems for those that had survived its fall.
The children were freed then, but in danger all the same, with the army and bounty hunters all out for their cursed blood. And I thought of here, elder, and the divine might of nature that imbues this forest. I thought perhaps that they could find a place here.
Deirdre confirmed.
Yes, it is true that the power of Sylvanus and the Great Mother flows strongly here, strong enough to mask their presence even from a more malevolent divine eye. So.
Deirdre smiled.
So, your friends are welcome among us.
The relief she felt left Jaehaera breathless. My thanks, elder.
No thanks,
Deirdre clucked genially.
The Oak Father would have me do no less. All life is precious, and these blighted souls are no less worthy of our aid for the unnaturalness of their beginnings.
Up ahead, the moss-rich stone of the ruins were filtering through the trunks, Deirdre beckoning Jaehaera after her as the woman stepped inside that ring of sacred trees. The ruins, much like their keeper, seemed little changed by the years, a ring of 6 square stone pillars, their granite surfaces covered in runes as old as the lichens that encrusted them, a language that had long ago lost its meaning in that world. In the center, a raised platform stood but a step from the forest floor, the dais still level even for the many roots which no doubt twisted beneath, 2 stone basins brimming with rainwater making a circle about a central pillar, the water shimmering in the slight breeze to distort the mosaic of pebbles lain within. It was an old place, its original use long forgotten and used now only by their clan to determine the summer solstice, but Jaehaera could still feel the power there. Deirdre smiled.
Do you recall, child, the first time you made pilgrimage here with me? On the Feast of the Moon, that winter a year after you arrived at the forest. The return of any soul to the Great Mother is nothing to be grieved when the end comes naturally, but for those lives that were stolen too soon, we would come here to place a stone in the basin and offer prayers to their memory. I remember, she answered, seeing so clearly how the moonlight had reflected on the water, a rippling pool of silver and as cold and alien as liquid metal as she had plunged her hand within to release her pebble to the icy depths. Deirdre was nodding, lost in her own memories. Yes, and afterwards I took you back to the Lowen glade where our small band had camped, and Berta tried to give you the last of the dates he had brought from his autumn walk out to the villages. I still recall his surprise when you took refuge in my lap and hid your face in my shoulder. It took an evening of coaxing to bestow his gift. You were such a curious child, so reluctant to reach out and take the things you truly wanted, as though you held within you still the memory of losing all you had once loved.
The woman sighed, letting a moment of silence give voice to her pity, continuing in a chuckle,
and yet you were so bold too, even back then. So ready to stand up to any tyranny. I recall the lecture you received from Elder Yumad, the Oak Father keep him, after you and that little bully, Deacon, were hauled apart for fighting over, what was it now? He had taken Nathaniel's bowstring and worn the end so it snapped on our hunt and nicked his face. Deacon had found some amusement in the trick, I had not.
Jahara frowned, feeling the old anger anew, though tempered now by years and experience. Nathaniel could have lost his bow, or worse his eye, though her reaction had helped nothing, merely driving the older boy further from their young group, and their clan.
Yes, there was always much resentment in young Deacon after his mother died. This life is not for everyone, even those born to it. I think it was for the best when he left to seek in fortune outside the grove. There were worries when you first arrived that it may be the same for you. That you would ever be longing for another life, like a seed carried far from its home climes, growing but never quite flourishing in some foreign soil. But, to all our joy, you embraced the life here, and ever was I chasing after you as we went about the forests, tracking the deer herds and collecting herbs for Zaphis, the Oak Father keep him. I was not a young woman even back then, and well past the age I would have had a child of my own, and you had me up trees and wading through bogs. Aha, what a sight we must have been!
Jahara flushed, torn between embarrassment and laughter.
I am sorry, Deirdre, I must have been a handful. No,
the woman chuckled.
It kept me fit, and a place should always ring with children's laughter. Our own brood were already out when you arrived this morning. Old Berta took them off fishing that we can dry their catch ready for the midsummer festivities. And you, child, will you remain here to see the midsummer with us?
Jahara felt the smile within her fade.
I cannot, Elder. The others, my companions, are expecting my return. They have need of me.
Deirdre watched her carefully, drinking in the reluctance.
Ah, another wound, I see, and one that is far from healed. You are on ill terms with them. No, at least not with them all.
Jahara sighed and took a moment to wonder how things had ever grown so bad.
I travel with one of the children, have traveled with her since the Iron Crisis in the north, before even Khalid was taken. We had a relationship once, of mentor and student, and then as friends when grief brought us closer, but then...
She paused, her stomach growing hot, the shame of the memories hard to bear even after so long.
We were driven apart, a lingering distrust keeping us from closing the rift, and as more time went on I began to doubt her. The Harpers, some of the Harpers, believe her to be a danger, a corrupted thing. I sided with her then and in times since, but of late...
Jahara shook her head, wishing she had just asked the girl before she had left instead of stalking off with the survivors, pride masking the worry of what the girl would tell her should she press her for an answer.
Fritha holds a hatred for the world where once had been only peace. Recently, I came to discover things of her past that would have made sense of this change, but when confronted she turned all I had believed upon its head. And there we parted. And what do you believe of her now? I do not know. Do you feel she is corrupted?
Jahara searched for an answer, but was saved the trouble.
You are thinking, Jahara, you are thinking on everything that has happened and on the opinions of others and all that you know of her, but that is not what I asked. What do you feel? You cannot read her heart, Jahara, but you can trust in your own heart.
Deirdre smiled.
I must make my prayers now, but stay a while if you can. I know the clan would have a chance to welcome again their absent daughter, even if the Mora would see her gone.
Jahara smiled and went to bow, Deirdre catching the gesture with a kiss upon her brow, the serenity of their meeting lingering with her as she made the long walk back to the river. The sun was up by now, and with it her companions. Enric stood upon the deck with Rowan and the dark-skinned Morgan taking in the sail, while the rest were gathered upon the southern bank with the grazing horses. The group sat upon blankets and cloaks to share a breakfast of bread and dried fish they had found in the hold, Lindrel's sharp eyes the first to spot her.
"Hail, Jahara, what news?"
Every breath was held. Jahara forced a smile and her answer passed the sudden lump to her throat.
"They have agreed. The druids here will take you in, the forest will hide you and none will find you again, lest you leave its bounds."
A murmured sigh across them, broken here and there by the gentle keen of quiet tears, and Jahara almost felt like crying too, the tensions built over a fortnight of struggle finally given release. The taciturn Gideon was searching for the words.
We never, you have our thanks."
Curry and those that had heard him were nodding fervently. Erina sat next to the Termian as she usually was, dry-eyed and smiling in that slight way she had acquired of late, as though last few days had aged her a lifetime.
"That is good news. Come, we saved you some breakfast."
Jahara sat and finished the meal with them, a raucous joviality returning that had been absent from the group since their tragic departure from Marmont, and little under an hour later they were setting out again and for the last time. They had cut the barge loose, letting the current take it back downstream to where another could claim it, but not before it had been stripped back to the tar, rations, canvases, ropes, and anything else that could be salvaged heaped upon the backs of their 2 horses, while patient plodding Gitali was entrusted with a graver burden, a thick body laid upon the travois she dragged, still wrapped in Curry's cloak and bound with ropes found on the barge, a lock of golden hair looped about the one that crossed his wounded heart. The glade was much busier than when she had left it, a combination, Jahara suspected, of the later hour and Deirdre's efforts to gather those who could be found. The few children were returned, too, sat about stooped old Berta as he showed them how to dry their catches over a small fire, the kindly man sparing her a nod as she arrived and all heads turned to the newcomers, Deirdre stepping forward to meet them with a gravity that commanded every ear.
"Greetings, children, I am Deirdre, elder to the druids of Ozif and you are welcome here. Jahara has told me of your plight, and I have relayed it to the clan, and between us we have decided the best course. Until the midsummer, we will all remain here within the glade and after which you will be divided into smaller groups and taken into the forests by we druids who will teach you the ways of this place and how to survive here. The forest will provide for all, but its gifts are earned through work and patience. Any who do not believe they can do this, cannot stay, for my clan cannot carry the burden of those who will not live in harmony with the Ozif."
There was no dissent, none spoke at all. Deirdre's warning softened to a smile.
"Come then, pitch what tents you have and gather about the fire pit and we shall find friends where before were only strangers."
A shared moment of hesitance, and in ones and twos the group moved forward to be welcomed in, Curry glancing back as he realized he was suddenly alone.
"You ain't coming, Erina?"
The girl spoke no answer, just shook her head. Jahara felt her heart twist.
"Come, shall we walk out a while?"
Jahara held little idea of where she was taking them, her feet leading them west, deeper into the forest with no care as to their destination. Erina matched her pace, following at a careless trudge, robes hitched up and eyes down as she made sure not to trip. Jahara had meant to use this chance to speak to the girl, but even as the words came she dismissed them. Such trite reassurances did nothing, and in the end only the ache remained, ever present, ever hungry, as though it would divert all thought and energy to dwelling upon its loss. Through distant trunks Jahara could see them drawing closer, the woman unwilling to confront the place, but seemingly unable to veer away, and then it was too late to change her course. There they were, standing on the edge of that broad glade, dominated by 3 towering beech trees, the maidens. They had grown far enough apart to allow light to reach the ground, the trees dancing in a lush meadow of grasses and cowslips. And there the pair settled beneath the largest of the three to watch the other two sway with the breeze. Arana leaned back against the trunk, gazing up into the leafy canopy with distant eyes.
It is beautiful here. The whole forest is beautiful, but here.
She trailed off. There was no need, that place spoke for her. Jahara let her gaze travel the glade, seeing it how it had been, the whole clan gathered, Deirdre in the robes she wore so rarely while she, herself, just stood there in the same tunic he had seen a dozen times before, however often she had mentioned this fact, unable to dissuade Medim and Parvata from braiding a half garland of soapwort into her hair. And there under that very tree that shaded them now, he had stood, as bright and fair as when he had first asked her, as though he had not once stopped smiling since, his tunic a match for that clear pale sky, the few freckles across his nose hidden under the blush of wine the men had plied him with that morning. Jahara smiled absently, he never had been able to take his drink.
This was where Khalid and I were joined in marriage in the autumn, his favorite season. The leaves here were the color of his hair.
Arana just nodded, her scraggy golden braid, unbound for days now, pulled over her shoulder, the girl seeming intent upon the fat flaxen brush that curled beneath the tie, trailing it back and forth between her fingers.
Athik was my brother. Even at our first meeting, I knew he was the other half of myself, and I feel.
Her voice broke, the words coming in a howl.
I feel robbed. Cast out and alone. But also blessed.
She croaked more quietly,
to have known one like him and to have been his friend and made him laugh and done good with him. And we did, you know, in the frontier lands and beyond. Wherever he went, Athik made his mark. Oh gods, just one more hour. I would give it all for just one more laugh or tug of braid, or to have him throw up my hood when I was not looking.
There was nothing else to be said, the girl breaking down to howl into her hands, and Jahara let her cry until no more tears would come, the sobs ebbing to sighs, until even they were calmed, Arana staring out at the trees as though the world was a dream.
He will need to be buried. I would like for it to be here. Then it shall. Thank you.
Silence fell between them again, and Jahara closed her eyes, resisting the temptation to lie back in that cradle of long grass. The sun had peaked, warming the glade to leave her sleepy, the woman drained in her misery. Arana's voice was soft, almost lost in the soughing canopy.
I know we may die soon, we children, if Bal comes back. If he finds us, I will try to protect the forest as best can. I won't let it perish with us. And if Fritha in our company manages to stop this, and the children are all safe,
Arana confirmed, her bloodshot eyes glazing over as she gazed into the future.
Then I will return home and settle again with my mother, at least for a time. I think she was always waiting for some trouble, always worrying what would become of her beautiful, blighted girl. It would do me good to know her mind would be finally set at ease. And, of course, I must visit the Golden Boar and tell Hantha and the others, they will be waiting for him.
They had not made it the night before, despite his invitation in the afternoon. Fritha had returned from the smugglers with a large joint of salted pork which had taken a while to cook, and by the time their meal was finished, there was little left to do but bed down for the night. But finally, after another long day in that dusty village, the moment had come. Night had fallen, the meal was eaten, all the dishes collected and cleaned, and with a long evening ahead of them in camp, Anoman had at last found a quiet moment to ask her, and now there was no going back. Brianna was standing beside him, the others sat in their usual places before tents and all staring up at them in roaring silence.
You're going to the tavern?
Repeated Fritha, voice coming slightly shrill in her disbelief.
Together?
Anoman nodded, trying not to look at her.
That is as I said. Oh, we'll come,
offered Imoen eagerly. Fritha's attention was already back on the parchment that rested on a folio in her lap.
I'm not sure they want us along, Imoen, you know, lowering the tone. No, no, by all means,
pressed the woman at his side. Either Brianna really did want them there or she had missed her true calling upon the stage. It was certainly all the encouragement Imoen needed, the girl dusting off her trousers as she made to stand.
Good then. Coming, Vals.
The tall man rose with a smile, the girl's attention already on her friend.
What about you, Fritha? Must have been a whole day since you've been on the ale. Yes, I wonder how I managed it. But I've things here to be getting on with.
Fritha glanced to the men still sat.
What about you two?
Minsk and Solafane shook their heads.
No, no, I am happy here, who does not like the noise? And I must practice my lute, would like to write prayer song to my lady before long. See, all occupied,
trilled Fritha.
You lot have fun.
Something which was much easier wished than accomplished, it seemed. A no-man walked along, the inn at the end of the dark street growing closer with each stiff step. He felt rigid in his own body and acutely aware of the woman matching his pace just next to him, Brianna examining the darkened buildings they passed with a determined focus. More giggling behind them, Valigar's deep, measured chuckle joining Imoen this time, and a no-man felt a surge of desperate resentment that it could be so simple for some. His mind churned, groping vainly for something to say. It would have all been a lot easier if she did not seem so reluctant about the whole thing. Perhaps he should ask her that, a perverse part of him suggested. Ask her why, after a 10-day of her favor, it seemed she had now completely changed her mind. But perhaps he was too content to place the blame upon her. His own behavior must have seemed strange, to have proclaimed nothing but fraternity for so long, and then suddenly offer more. He screwed up his courage and made to take her hand, a no-man determined to capture some of the familiarity those behind him were so merrily flaunting, the woman noticing this lunged to whip her hand out of reach with a questioning frown. He tried a smile and let his arm fall back to swinging stiffly at his sides, his eyes returned to the inn. Well, it would all be easier after some ale. The tavern was the usual press of noisy drunkards, most of the mercenaries stood or sat, a few engaged in cards or dice, while one group gambled over a game of bones, the board chalked onto the wooden floorboards. They had managed to get a table by the door, Valigar returning from the bar with an ale pitcher and a frown, though his displeasure was not shared, Imoen gazing about the rabble with shining eyes.
Fritha told me it was a bit wild in here, but she didn't say anything about this. No,
agreed Valigar shortly,
she did not. Ah, poor Vals, we can leave if you. Here, new blood,
shouted the older mercenary who was knelt next to the bones board, his wide grin on Imoen.
You want a game? Why not, if you've so much gold you're keen to lose it?
A round of gruff laughter, Valigar taking a table closer to the board where better to keep a watchful eye upon the girl as she stooped for the tokens. A no-man swallowed a mouthful of ale, the game not interesting enough to warrant his attention for much longer, the discomfort of not looking at her finally greater than the embarrassment of doing so.
They seem to be enjoying their evening.
Brianna smiled, eyes back on her cup.
To be fair, I imagine Imoen could find amusement anywhere. And you, my lady? The evening has been pleasant enough.
A no-man watched her take a drink, her long fingers notched here and there with long-heeled scars, just as his own were. This was right.
I am glad, my lady. I was under the impression you were reluctant to join me this evening.
Her frown did not hide the guilty cast to her eyes, the cup lowered with a terse sigh.
"Anomen, it is not that, I merely wonder whether I have a duty here, as do you, and nothing can be allowed to disrupt that." "And this will?"
he pressed. The woman just shook her head.
"This is not a good time, Anomen, for either of us. I understand how you feel, that emptiness inside, how you would try anything to fill the void, but this will do little."
Anomen mouthed silently a moment, astounded that she had just come out and so bluntly presented him with the shame that had squirmed black and oily in his heart since he had first asked her, his fervent desire to assuage his conscience making him all the more earnest to prove both her and himself wrong.
"If you believe I only asked you out of need for some sort of distraction, then you are gravely mistaken. I want no promise from you, Brianna, I merely wish us to become better acquainted."
His voice softened, a hand moving to take her own in the gesture he had been attempting all evening.
"The end could come at any time, I would explore what could be between us before it is too late."
Brianna gazed down at their hands, entwined upon the pitted table, her eyes distant under the frown, as though she looked at something that no longer belonged to her.
Yes, I suppose we could try."
He patted her hand and moved to take up his ale cup once more, laughter from Imoen drawing his attention back to the tavern before as the girl won another hand, the ruckus about the gaming board little different to the vinous chaos that surrounded them, men shouting and laughing. At the doors, a disagreement had erupted to a brawl, the friends of both parties hastily pushing them out into the courtyard before the landlord barred the lot of them, while in the far corner the maid's shrill scolding was lost to the gruff jeers of his friends as a bleary-eyed young lad collapsed into pool of his own vomit. Anomen lowered his cup, too disgusted to drink any more.
"Helm's beard, I never thought any place would have me longing for the coronet." "The coronet? Is that in Athkatla? I confess I visited few of the taverns outside of the main promenade." "No, I doubt any from the order would go there outside of necessity. Simon, Eric, and I usually drank in the Myth Rest, or Goose and Garden if Simon was meeting some of his temple sisters for a dance. And the 5 flagons over on the bridge often had minstrels as well, though they had not the room for dancing. And then there were the taverns that overlooked the harbor."
Across the table, Brianna quirked a teasing eyebrow.
"It sounds as though you were quite the carouser." "No, indeed, my lady," he corrected hastily, "I confess we spent most evenings completing chores for our knights or studying in the order's library."
True enough, and yet even those were times to be reminisced upon it seemed, Anomen struck by just how much he missed his friends and the life they had once shared. As a squire, he had longed for nothing for them to be knighted, but now he could see the joy in those simpler days when the 3 of them were squires, eager for glory and untroubled by the grey doubts that plagued him now. Sir Ryan had been his conscience and his course both, and not once had he questioned it.
"As for the Copper Coronet, it is a tavern in the slums and a known haunt for mercenaries. It was there I first met."
The correction came so quick, he doubted Brianna even noted it.
"This company, when I was but a squire, hungry for a chance to prove myself."
Brianna let a smile grace the rim of her cup.
"And surely, your wish was granted."
Anomen nodded, though this chance and the achievements it had led to stirred little pride in him anymore.
"So, were any of the taverns in Valem's court as fine as this one, my lady?" "No, though I am ashamed to admit after your tales that I went to only one and only then on a handful of occasions, usually with men from the militia to celebrate some sound victory or recent promotion." "You had friends among them?"
Brianna shrugged, eyes flicking upwards to think on it.
"A few. Life outside the temple was not encouraged. Let me see, there was young Darvin, Atul, Narav." "I am surprised so many southerners found their way north. Atul and Narav are Tetharan names."
She faltered, seeming surprised he had noted such.
Why, yes, I never considered that. I suppose some dowdy farmer's wife wanted an exotic name from a place she had only heard of. Perhaps she hoped the child would one day see the place its name called home, though in their cases the hope was in vain. Neither are young men, they have lived in Valem's court since their births and will likely die there, too, defending the town from the orcs and bandits that would prey upon the trade that feeds it. At least they will give their lives for some greater cause,
A Nomen snorted, another cacophony of cheers and groans booming from the games behind.
The dregs around us would fight and die for the coin in their purse, though I wonder why the monastery's gold has brought them here.
Brianna took another sip, considering the matter.
Well, thinking on it logically, you would raise an army to either attack or defend, so Balthazar either has an enemy he believes will soon move against him, or he intends to strike first. The question would be who? The monastery is supposed to hold much knowledge of the children. Could it be he plans to defend them? He certainly seems to care not a whit for this village, and what else is there to defend? Perhaps, but if he is concerned with their safety, why let them camp on the edge of the desert, so exposed to attack? Maybe Balthazar seeks only to protect his own, the monastery and the secrets it holds.
A Nomen scrubbed a frustrated hand across his face.
I hate this, all these unanswered questions. I can never shake this feeling we are missing some vital piece of a larger puzzle. Perhaps we are,
Brianna laughed,
and perhaps we are better off not knowing. Here, drink up.
She continued, topping up their cups with the last of the ale.
We are here now, and though likely the worst tavern in Tethur, we may as well make the best of it. Besides, from the sound of your stories, I have quite a bit of catching up to do.
She grinned, and in spite of everything, the emptiness within and the uproar about them, A Nomen felt himself smile back. Flickering light filled the clearing, broken by the press of dark bodies that mingled about the fire pit and wafted the scent of roasting boar to her in appetizing clouds. The Lowen glade was a chaotic thrum of people, more than even the midsummer could usually gather to celebrate the year's turn beneath bowing leave, though those assembled this evening were not as ready to rejoice. The children reunited after their divided expeditions into the surrounding forests to the clearing where they would eat and camp their first night in long-sought safety. Jahara lingered on the edge of the circle, leant against an obliging sycamore and letting the bark press its pattering into the back of her hand. It had been a long day, and she felt as though she had been holding herself stiff for most of it, for her companion's sake as well as the old friends that had come in dribs and drabs to ask her of her travels. Each murmured condolence on her loss, merely serving to remind her of it, and she had been grateful when the sun had dipped and the act could slip slightly under the forgiving veil of night. But they meant well, and she was not the only one who suffered, her gaze drawn to the girl across the clearing, sandy robes enriched to vivid ochre by the firelight. Erina was talking to the old druid Berta, a quiet solemnity to her face that Jahara wondered would ever lift. They had held the burial that afternoon. Erina had not wept, her voice clear and strong as she had spoken of her brother to those few who had asked to attend, Curry at her side, just as he was now.
Jahara,
came that smile in the twilight, the woman stepping a pace from her sanctuary to meet their approach, Nathaniel joined by Enric, the two men's knowledge of healing forming a ready bond between them.
I was hoping to see you again before I left. You leave tonight? No, but the dawn will find me gone. Deirdre wants the news of our decision here taken to the rest of the clan. I'll find who I can and send them here for midsummer.
Enric shook his head, smiling though she could tell he was embarrassed.
You go to much trouble on our behalf.
Nathaniel merely shrugged.
Our sister brought you, our elder welcomed you, you are kin now, friend, and the clan protects their own.
The shout of his name drew all their eyes across the camp. A tall, blonde woman cast golden in the firelight. Nathaniel raised a hand in reply.
I should go and see what Medim wants. Deirdre has set her the same task and we will need to discuss our routes. I will find you later though, Jaehaera, we need to catch up before you leave us again.
A grinned to her, a nod to Enric, and he was gone, the pair he left watching him stalk across the clearing. At her side, a long sigh.
He seems a good man, they all do, even those who are wary welcome us. Yes, I am glad that, at least, some of my old alliances still hold true. You are still bitter at the Harper's actions. Let us just say I yet have much to mourn, but I am hardly alone in that.
Erina was still in conversation with Berta, Curry all but overlooked as he lingered at her arm, though he did not press for her attentions. Jaehaera sighed faintly.
He favors her, though I wonder how long it will be before she would welcome such. The feelings may die before they can bloom. Love can grow without encouragement, but it is hard to maintain.
Enric shrugged.
Perhaps all is not lost. I heard him asking before, if after all is done here, he can accompany her back to Loudwater. She did not say no. Erina is wise enough not to lose herself to grief.
They watched as the man squeezed her shoulder, the pair parting with a nod for Curry to be welcomed into the more lively group behind him.
And he seems wise enough to be patient.
Jaehaera felt her brow furrow as, across the clearing, Deirdre joined Erina and Berta, the older woman's curiosity visible even from that distance.
I wonder what has them all so fascinated. When I was speaking to Nathaniel he mentioned that Erina and Deirdre had been speaking about the ruins here and your elder told her they were on a ley line. Apparently, Erina knows of similar ruins to the one here in the Ozif placed in the high forest, and Berta became very excited by this. He has long theorized that many other such sites exist, perhaps even all over Faerun, and the sites were once somehow used for communications between an ancient web of druids. In the meantime though, Erina believes she can harness the power of the lines and open a portal to teleport you back west. I think she was worried about you traveling such a distance alone. She likely asks your elder for permission now.
Back the trio, Deirdre was nodding kindly. Jaehaera, rather touched the girl would put aside her own concerns for another's.
She is kind to think of it. She says it is easier when she is keeping busy. Yes, it is.
Enric just nodded. Jaehaera left to ask,
and what of you? I will remain here while the children have need of me, I owe them that much. And afterwards, I will return to Dar Omar and see that Temis's work does not go unfinished. Helstein and the Harpers may be happy to see them forgotten, but I will ensure that those imprisoned by their deception will be remembered and, God's willing, released. A worthy goal. And one I doubt I can or will accomplish alone,
the man continued, gaze flicking to the dark knot of men opposite. Gideon sat silent among them.
I imagine there are a few here would be glad of a chance to repay the debt that saw them safe.
He turned back to her, eyes hidden behind flashing spectacles, and Jaehaera realized suddenly that this would likely be the last time she would sit with the man who had so risen in her estimation. But she would think on him still after she left there, think on him, on Ithik and on Themis whenever she needed a reminder that whatever happened, some had felt this endeavor to save those doomed people was worthwhile. As though he sensed the same finality to the air, Enric turned to her.
I do not know when you will leave tomorrow, but I doubt I will have the opportunity to talk with you again like this.
He drew a long breath and she was surprised to see him smile.
I wish to thank you, Jaehaera, for giving me the chance to join you on your journey here, and to begin to make amends for what I was a part of. And,
he added, the beginnings of a laugh warming his words,
and tell Fritha, right to the last, she had me fooled.
End of chapter.